here we go again. Another massively but very necessary big deep dive into a TV show that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time, and today it's The Vampire Diaries. Last time it was Gilmore Girls. That video was over 2 hours long, and now we've got this one. 40 pages of notes, 7 months of work. I'm ready for it. Where do I start? Cycle back 4 or 5 years. I watched the first few episodes of The Vampire Diaries. Spoiler alert, I didn't like it. I thought it was bad and cringy. I'm so glad I gave this show another chance and rewatched it one more time, because I looked at it with a whole fresh pair of eyes and realized it deserved way more credit than I had given it, and I actually loved it. It is now, without a doubt, one of my favorite teen shows. Even though it's messy, even though it's a bit silly, I still love it. It's just so good in the first 3 seasons. Season 1 was so amazing in terms of how watchable it was and just the quality of the writing and the dialogue. Kevin Williamson talked a lot about how he kind of infused his own grief experiences into the show when he was working on it, and so one of the central themes of the show is actually grief. Every single character we learn deals with grief in a different way. For Stefan, it's running away and disassociation. For Elena, it's denial and then a full-blown breakdown. Matt just cries. Jeremy tries to use substances to make it go away. Caroline starts organizing and trying to make her life perfect. Every single character has their own way of dealing with their grief and their feelings, which is a very central topic that I thought was really well explored. But something very strange and mysterious happened to The Vampire Diaries as it went on, where these themes were not dealt with as well as you would hope or expect. And by the end of the show, The Vampire Diaries became quite bad. Like, really bad. So, how did this happen? Let's get into it, starting off with season 1. The dialogue is great in season 1. The way the show's introduced is fantastic, and the way the characters communicate really makes sense and seems so mature, and it's just got some iconic lines. Damon's one-liners are amazing, and there's a lot of gore as well, and blood and violence, which really contrasts to the fact that you'd think it's just this soapy romance. There's this weird contrast between romantic fluffy scenes and then Damon ripping someone's heart out. Sure, it's weird when you think about it, the age of the vampires, the fact that 25-year-old Damon is stuck in a young body and sleeping with underage girls, and they're lusting after 17-year-old Elena. Of course it's creepy, but if you just suspend your disbelief and don't look into it too much, season 1 is amazing. I get why this show was so huge at the time and one of the biggest teen shows to this day, and had such an impact on pop culture, because at the heart of it, it's so iconic. They combined the audience's Twilight obsession at the time with this element of supernatural romance and infused it together. So I want to start this video with a disclaimer, because I know some fans are very sensitive. As the video goes on, if I do criticize, it's from a place of love, because I really enjoyed this show, and if I could erase my memory and watch it all again for the first time, I would, and my family all collectively agreed that it's great. So if I criticize, it's genuinely from a kind place. The first thing I want to get out of the way is that this show should only have had 4 seasons, but stick till the end and you'll find out why. Season 1 is memorable and iconic and fabulous. The thing that really stands out throughout the whole show is the Damon-Stefan relationship. It is arguably the reason why you stay and you keep watching. Seeing them fight, seeing their relationship fall apart because of some petty, stupid thing over a girl of all things, and you're just rooting for them the entire time. Stefan and Damon are 2 vampire brothers obsessed with teenage mortal Elena, because she looks exactly the same, mysteriously, as both of their lost loves, Catherine. But as she becomes romantically involved with Stefan, the plot escalates and it puts her in danger and opens her up to a whole supernatural world of werewolves and hybrids and vampires that she didn't even know existed, all in her local hometown of Mystic Falls. Stefan and Damon feel the need to compete, and they've had a rivalry for centuries, but you know that deep down they really love each other. And what makes it more believable is the fact that these actors are played by Somerhalder and Paul Wesley, who are actually close friends in real life, constantly roasting each other on Instagram. I love keeping up with the Instagram drama. It's so funny to watch. And what makes it even cooler is they actually both own a company called Brothers Bourbon, where they sell bourbon, which is possibly the best marketing decision they could have made, because bourbon is constantly featured in the show. The whole thing feels like one long drawn out commercial for bourbon, with the brothers constantly talking about it and always drinking in times of stress. So the irony is just great. I love their relationship in real life and on the show. It really shows their chemistry on screen. But what's interesting is that season 1 shows Damon as a real villain, someone that cannot be trusted, and is one of the most significant antagonists of season 1, and it's a real selling point. But then we have the introduction of Catherine's return, which is one of the most iconic and well executed scenes in the show, and she is probably the best villain the show's ever had. She's Elena's doppelganger, meaning she looks exactly the same as Elena. And so when she comes on screen at first, you don't realize that it's Catherine. You think it's Elena. And the whole way that scene is done is so scary, and I'll give credit where credit's due. The writers nailed that. It was terrifying, the way that she was pretending to be Elena, and then you realize too late that it's not Elena. And actually they reversed Nina Dobrev's hair parting to subconsciously let the viewers know that something wasn't quite right. And what really, like, the writers should get their flowers for this, is the way that they build up to Catherine, her reveal as a villain, where she's mentioned by name and seen in some flashbacks, but we haven't actually met her yet, which makes her introduction far more terrifying. And I love it when they do villains in this way. I also love the ending of season 1, the finale, and making Caroline a vampire was one of the best decisions they ever made, although season 1 isn't without its faults. Nothing's perfect. The whole council storyline has always been quite tiresome and weak, because it's not really clear what these guys actually want. And a lot of the show is them sitting around talking about how much they hate vampires and telling us stuff as the audience that we already know. Another major weak point is Joe Goldberg. He pisses me off so much. I don't know what it is about this character, but I just cannot stand him. Isabel, who was Elena's mum, is again another major weak part of the early seasons, because she speaks in a monotone. The actress is laughably bad. She's so wooden in every single scene, and yet the way they hyped her up was ridiculous. She's introduced as this incredibly significant character, Elena's mum of all people. You're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so important, and then she just doesn't do anything. And when she dies even, it should be emotional, but the whole storyline led to nothing, contributed to nothing, and ultimately felt pointless and kind of like a dead end. Now let's get into season 2. It was still iconic. It was thoroughly enjoyable. In fact, I would argue it's so enjoyable that even some little plot holes or errors, which there are many, you just ignore, because it's so amazing. It's so fun. Like, I was just obsessed. Right up my alley. Soapy romance combined with drama, and then the supernatural and hot actors. Like, what's not to like? And I love they show that Catherine is afraid of someone, who's, enter the next big villain, Klaus, because Catherine's terrifying, so if she's scared of someone, he must be really bad. And Klaus was just the best addition to the series. He's one of the best characters in the entire show. He works so well as a villain. The actor nails it, and it's thoroughly enjoyable. The only thing that kind of annoys me is that the first time we properly see Klaus, he's possessed Alaric's body, so you're not actually seeing Klaus being Klaus, you see him through another actor, and that bothered me simply because the actor is too good in this role. He's too iconic, he's too fabulous to then not allow him to be him for his first introductory scene. But aside from that, this season is really strong. We see Caroline transitioning more into a vampire, and we see Stefan kind of coaching her, which was super cool. We have an iconic romance kind of building between Damon and Elena, but we don't really know whether they're going to be a thing or not, but it's obvious that he's becoming a better guy and you don't really know what's going to happen there. And overall, still a really strong season. The biggest weak point is the introduction of the werewolves. In fact, this foreshadows a recurring problem with this show, where it's a supernatural show, and yet the world building, the laws, the magical laws around how things work and what the rules are, it's more than just soft fantasy. It's like non-existent. It's like there's no foundational, you can tell they're making it up as they go along. Same with werewolves. It should be complicated, but all we know is that when they bite a vampire, the bite is fatal. It's a painful transition, and we're not really given much more than that, so they don't contribute much to the storyline. And I like the way they show the transition, how hardcore and painful it is. I just wish they would have fleshed out the whole purpose of the werewolves a bit more, because it comes across like the writers themselves are kind of just winging it, and they don't really know why the werewolves are there, and they haven't planned it, and that lack of depth really shows. Another foreshadowing of later issues to come is secondary characters that don't really serve a purpose, that are there, but you don't really know what they're doing. Like Elena's mum, for example, the son-father witch duo who are just killed off for no reason. Isabel, Anna, like these characters don't need to be there. But overall, I love this season because it ends on a really suspenseful dark note with Klaus winning, which is so unusual for a season to end where all seems lost and the bad guy actually got what he wanted. And with the loss of a major character, which is Jenna, her being brutally, violently killed in a way where you just don't expect it every time. And it made me realize, looking back on it, kind of zooming out with a bird's eye view, that season 1 to 3 was when the show really felt like it had stakes. So now let's get into season 3. This was the strongest season. This was unbelievable. This was amazing. It was really the moment the show peaked. We have this awesome partnership between Klaus and Stefan, where we find out they were friends years ago and Stefan didn't even know about it. We see Stefan being evil Stefan, which is the best Stefan, with him being this evil duo with Klaus and them taking down people for fun, which is so entertaining. And also it's so nice to see this, for once, moral ambiguity of Stefan, where there's this awesome role flip between him and Damon, where now Damon's being more of like the good brother, and we see this hot and steamy romance building between Damon and Elena. And the motel scene, which is, I'm sorry, this is a cinematic masterpiece. This is the best scene in the entire show. I will die on this hill. The best freaking scene. And what I love about these 3 seasons is that every episode is so jam-packed of action and so insane, it feels like a season finale. However, the ending of season 3 is surprisingly weak. And I knew something was wrong when I watched it the first time, but I didn't really process it until I rewatched it, because it just doesn't go in the direction it should. It's a blatant error. Like, it should have ended with all the characters finalizing Klaus's arc and killing him and getting rid of him for good. So season 3 could end up on a positive note of, okay, we finally got rid of Klaus. Instead, it seems like he died, and then we find out Bonnie's done this spell. And now Klaus isn't actually gone, and in fact, he's trapped in Tyler's body and no one knows except Bonnie. And you're like, oh, okay. And it sort of goes like that, because why? Why couldn't they just have got rid of him? He had no purpose in the show anymore. He'd done his bad, evil stuff, and his arc was genuinely complete. Like, there was nothing else to say, and at that point, he should have left the show. And then they tried to kind of balance the playing field by making out that whatever's going on with Alaric is kind of turning him into this villain, and so he'll rival Klaus in terms of who's a more formidable villain. But since he can't really ever seem as threatening as Klaus, it just doesn't quite work. And also, villainizing Alaric just seems a little bit, like, disappointing. Why did this happen, you ask? Well, it's because the writers have a pattern of getting very obsessed with their characters, as they've been kind of open about in interviews, and not being able to let go of them, which is why Klaus keeps sticking around past season 3, even though his journey was over. It's the same way they keep Elijah there even though like he should have left. It's the same way that Enzo stayed in the show in season 6 when he has nothing to do. And this isn't something I'm just like making up. This is something Julie Plec has basically said in interviews, is that sometimes they're there because she needs to fill screen time and is kind of just buying time, or she just likes them and is like, hang on, this character's, they're great, they really slay. And then she overuses them. Ultimately, many things with this show could have been so much better if they just narrowed down the amount of characters, because there's too many in this show. And if they just allowed people's stories to be over, and if they'd also known when to finish the show and when the story had been told. And also they should have ended with Catherine being the final villain, the overarching villain in the final 2 seasons, as opposed to jumping between creating new villains and adding in new ones, especially because the show started with Catherine. It should have ended with her as well. And maybe I'm the one that's actually just terrible at letting characters go, but I was devastated when they killed Alaric off, because I really felt like the minute his character left the show just went downhill, and it just wasn't the same without him. Like, I don't care, put your opinions about the actor aside because he's trash. I loved the character of Alaric, and I just loved seeing him in the show. I loved his relationship with Damon. And when they went down this whole evil possessed Alaric route, I was so sad to see him go. Like, why would you keep Matt in the show and remove Alaric? It just fundamentally does not make sense. But now we've got that out the way, the best seasons in the show that you should definitely watch because they're amazing. This video has taken, unfortunately, a really bad turn because I wish I could just be positive the whole time and say it's perfect. This is what you guys have probably been waiting for. Season 4. Yeah. Season 4 onwards is when the biggest issues with the show start to peek their head. And by big, I mean big. This was also the only season, well, the final season of the show where I felt like I was still really excited about it and enjoying it. Because season 5, although there were so many enjoyable things that I really loved, there was also so much stuff that annoyed me. It was kind of like a mixed bag. Season 4, I'd say the first part is significantly better than the second part. But they're still good here. In season 4 and 5 and 6, there was never like a bad season where it's like there's nothing good. There's always stuff to merit. There's always really amazing subplots. The problem is that there's also stuff that just disappoints you because the quality was up here in the first 3 seasons. So your expectations are higher. And when they bring in stuff that's just blatantly wrong and disappointing, you're like, oh, now it's here, but it should be here, because I just love this show so much that when they did something, let's say that a character would just frankly never do, or something that just should objectively not have happened, it's much more disappointing. So season 4 opens with a bang in a really good way where Elena is now a vampire. And I loved this. I felt like it was a long time coming. It was kind of inevitable. Something bad would happen to her. And watching her transition is super cool. And the whole thing from beginning to end with the way it happened was awesome. Like Rebecca getting angry, Elena getting into the water with the car, and the whole thing being full circle like it was in the pilot with how her parents died. It just worked. And I loved, oh my gosh, the plot twist of the fact that the vampire blood was in her system and they didn't tell us that at first was insanely good. There were some plot holes, to be honest, like the fact that she told Stefan to come back for her and save Matt first was like a really dumb thing for her to suggest, but also it doesn't make sense because Stefan can move at superhuman speed. He's a vampire, so explain to me why when he came back to save her after saving Matt, she was already dead. An unfortunate part of season 4 that really rubs me the wrong way is that it's a massive disservice to Klaus's character because he's just there, kind of chilling, but like he shouldn't be there because he and the other originals at this point have served their purpose. There's nothing for them to do. They have such an unthreatening kind of aimless presence that really bothers me. And the reason why it feels so wrong is because they literally have no reason to be there. They shouldn't be there at all. They're not doing anything. They have no like master plan to hurt anyone. They're literally just existing in this show, but they should have left. They should have left. And the problem is that now Elena's a vampire. There's just too many superhuman beings. Obviously then Alaric at some point becomes a vampire, and it's Garbaggio, because at this point the only mortal being is Matt. And the whole intrigue of the show is that everyone's normal except for this small subset of vampires. Like this, they're like a marginalized group. They're not meant to be like the norm. They're meant to be like the ones on the side that you don't really expect, maybe, who are not the norm. They're the anomaly. And that's why it's meant to be interesting, is because Elena's there living a normal life, and then the vampires come and disrupt her stable life. It doesn't work then when you make every single character a superhuman being. Even at one point, Jeremy starts developing superhuman abilities. I think it's season 4. It doesn't make sense when he becomes a vampire hunter with the weird tattoo. That it's silly, because also if all these characters are having magical abilities and becoming immortal, where are the stakes? How are we meant to fear for their lives when we know that they can't die? Oh my god, that's coconut water. That is unbelievable. Oh my god, that's so good. It's like 50 million degrees right now. Also, if you want to see my Patreon where I talk about the Vampire Diaries, go check it out now. It's only $2 a month if you want to help support me and my channel so I can keep making these videos for you. It will be in the description. Another thing that really rubs me the wrong way is the subplot of the cure to vampirism, which is absolutely filled with plot holes and things that don't make sense. It's just inconsistent as well, and it's probably one of the murkiest subplots they've done in this whole show. We are also introduced to the Silas problem in season 4, which bothers me so much that I fucking can't. I cannot stand this subplot. This is the moment, the pivotal moment, where the show pushed it too far and they jumped the shark. It's the same thing as many important villains, where we hear his name, we hear him mentioned, we see him possessing people, but we haven't actually seen him yet. It builds tension, suspense, and then we finally meet him in the flesh. When we do, it is the most stupid... It's so lazy. When we meet Silas, he's been asleep for like 2,000 years. Then he wakes up in the year 2010 or whenever this show is set, and he's fine. He doesn't really care about the fact that the world is unrecognizable. He can drive, he knows how to use a phone, he speaks proper English. He's chill. Like he's not even frazzled. He's not even curious about like, you know, how fast food works or anything that you would normally be concerned by. He has no issue. But as you may have noticed, the thing that's even more ridiculous is he looks the exact same as Stefan. He is in fact Stefan's doppelganger. I know. So in season 1 we learned that Elena was the doppelganger of Catherine. This isn't meant to be a normal thing. You're meant to be like a freak of nature. It's this incredibly rare anomaly which never fully made sense from the beginning. But basically, Catherine became immortal, so they balanced the scales and they created Elena, who's identical to her except mortal rather than a vampire. It is in fact so rare that people are like, is that for real? And her blood is used for spells. It's not meant to be like any second person can be a doppelganger. That's not how it works. But in one simple scene, they undo it all with the introduction of Silas, therefore making us question the entire legitimacy of, I don't know, everything that happened beforehand. Because now there's this dude walking around that looks the same as Stefan. And then we find out, just to humiliate us even further, that Catherine is not in fact Catherine. Catherine herself is a doppelganger. So Elena is a doppelganger of a doppelganger. So now there's not just Nina Dobrev playing 2 different roles, but she's playing 3 different characters. We learn that as Silas and his partner became immortals, because Silas is like the first original witch, so he's really powerful. They had to do this rebalancing of nature, whatever that means. I don't really get it, to be honest. It doesn't make sense. But basically, if you suspend your disbelief enough, nature has to rebalance, okay? So with their children, every few generations or whatever it is, they're recreated in mortal bodies, but there's this weird thing where it's like apparently they're soulmates. They have to like find each other, which I'm kind of confused by, because it's like if you're soulmates, you're meant to fall in love, but aren't you related? Doesn't make sense. But that means that Stefan and Elena are obviously both doppelgangers, but they're also soulmates, which also means that you kind of question the entire legitimacy of their romantic relationship, because if they're not soulmates, if they're not destined and meant to be, then what are they? Do you know what I mean? Like, if they're not, does that strip them does that strip them of their autonomy then? Like, did they consciously choose to be together and date in season 1? Or was that again like nature inevitably pulling them together and they have no control over it? But then we learn that Silas and his partner never had children and were just put to sleep. So if that's the case, then how could they have made an heir if they never had kids? Because if they never had kids, then obviously Elena and Stefan couldn't exist if they're the descendants of them, right? Also, we were literally told that nothing could get more powerful than the originals, but they try and make Silas seem even more intimidating by saying he's the oldest original witch, to try and make him seem more scary or threatening than Klaus. And at this point, it's starting to get a bit silly, because rather than just focusing on a few, maybe 3 key villains, it's like every single season we're introduced to a new villain who has more powers, who's more sinister and intimidating than we knew they could be. And they're even more dangerous, they're even bigger and even worse. And then they bring in another one who's actually worse. And I think it would be better to just focus on less characters. We're also introduced to some really infuriating characters like April Young and Atticus Shane, who are literally the bane of my existence and are just so annoying. Killing Jeremy I understood, even though it was tragic, because his arc was over, and it did provide more opportunities for Elena to explore her grief over losing her brother, but they render that entire subplot meaningless when then they bring Jeremy back later with this magical spell. So Elena's entire arc is then reverted, and it means that her character never changes. Like, you think that losing Jeremy will fundamentally change her because she turns off her humanity and it damages her, and it really makes her more cynical and sad. But then if you just bring Jeremy back to life again, it kind of makes me feel like her entire arc, exploring her grief over it, didn't change anything. Also, Elena becomes sire to Damon, which really bothered me because it felt like a massive disrespect to their relationship and also the legitimacy of Damon's feelings for Elena and her feelings for him. All I'd ever seen throughout the show was that their feelings for each other were true and genuine, even if maybe to some people it didn't make much sense, it was real. And so for them to then kind of backtrack by saying, oh no, like she only had sex with him because she was sired to him, was A, disgusting, and B, it's like saying that she doesn't have control over her feelings for him. Then they kind of managed to swoop in at the brink of no return and save it by saying, no, like her feelings for him are real because the sire bond, like it may affect your actions, but it doesn't affect your emotions. And she felt like she was in love with him, so therefore it's real. But again, that doesn't really like sell me because it doesn't make sense. It's inconsistent. Like Tyler, for example, he was sired to Klaus. It didn't just make him blindly obey Klaus's orders with no feeling, resenting it. The sire bond very much influenced his feelings towards Klaus. He went from hating Klaus to suddenly defending him, defending Klaus's decisions, and being on his side. Therefore, the sire bond did affect his emotions. I know what you're thinking. Okay, like this sounds pretty bad, but it's kind of the normal flaws that any show would have. It can't get any worse, right? Wrong. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I now have an unpopular opinion, which is that season 5 is like relatively fun. It's actually really watchable. Many people say that the show is unwatchable from season 5 onwards, and I do think that's a bit harsh. There's plenty there to like about it. But there's also many things I didn't like. For example, for the life of me, I don't understand why people like Enzo. I don't. I can't stand him. Like, I get it. They're trying to like replace Klaus to find another British man with a sexy British accent, but I really feel like that's all he is, and he just annoys me. Season 5 is also the most kind of forgettable, unmemorable season. I cannot really remember what happens in season 5. I guess because none of it really was that significant or meant anything, but I think back in it and I'm like, okay, what happened in season 5? I'm like, was that the season where Bonnie died and kept coming back to life? Yeah, but what else happened? Like, it's crazy how hard it is to remember. And at this point, all the stuff in season 5 and 6 is kind of like blurring into one. Like, I can't really distinguish it. And then we're introduced to the Travelers, who are meant to be the new villains. I don't remember, I'm not even joking, a single thing about these people. Like, literally nothing, because they just remind me so much of the tomb vampires in season 1, but we kind of already did that, so I'm just like, I don't care about it. Elena's selfishness also really brings down the quality of the season, because she seems slightly indecisive, like questioning, did I make a mistake? You know, should I be with Stefan? Just seems to be thinking about whether she should be with him or not, which I think is just insanely obnoxious, because at that point you literally are stringing them both along. Oh, and at one point, I don't know if it's season 5 or 6, because again, it's all a blur, but they have, I think it's season 5, this whole evil doctor experimenting on vampires, like an evil Frankenstein subplot thing, which is just so stupid. What else really annoys me, which I don't see anyone talking about, but it has to be said, is they have a whole boringly prolonged, might I add, episode of saying farewell to Catherine and showing that she did have some good in her, showing flashbacks to her childhood and good times in her life because she's sick and dying. It's like, goodbye, Catherine. And then she's saying, you know what, I shouldn't be selfish for once, I should let myself die. And you're like, wow, like, this is such an interesting ending for her character. Then it turns out she's not dead. She's completely fine, and her daughter saved her so she could swap bodies with Elena, because she's ultimately selfish basically and will always put herself first no matter what the odds. But that really annoyed me, because I was like, oh, so that whole goodbye was just pointless because she's fine. And it also made that whole thing of showing some of Catherine's humanity and good sides completely pointless, because there's so much bad there that it literally like undoes all of the good. However, even though I don't like the way they went about it, this was a good storyline overall. Catherine pretending to be Elena was the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life, and it also gave Nina Dobrev a really great opportunity to show off her acting, because she's acting pretending to be acting, so it's like acting and acting. It's so funny because Catherine obviously knows she has to take over Elena's body and be her. The issue is that she literally despises Elena, so every scene she's kind of thinking, what would Elena say in this situation? What would Elena do? And so she's just constantly rolling her eyes at herself because she hates Elena so much, and just trying to pretend to care, because she knows she should like pretend to care like Elena would care, but she's really bad at it and doing a really unconvincing job that people are like, oh, that's weird. And it's so funny. The whole reason season 5 is actually fun and enjoyable is because of Catherine holding it together. Like, old lady Catherine, are you kidding me? Like, that was so funny. It was just like, I'm aging. Like, it was so good. Also, something super weird happens where Klaus, I think he was off doing the originals show, but he just comes back for an episode, reappears, hooks up with Catherine, and then disappears again. Bonnie takes a backseat for like 13 episodes where it seems like she's not even in the show. Like, I actually forgot she existed. And also in season 5, my biggest pet peeve is that Damon's character is literally massacred to the ground. Like, he undoes all of his wonderful character development and just becomes a douchebag again, killing people for fun because Elena doesn't love him or something. And it's terrible because it makes it seem like his only remote incentive for being a good person is because of Elena, and like she's the only piece holding him together. It made him look like a loser. Like, it wasn't fun anymore. I was honestly shocked to see Damon's behavior in season 5, and it made me realize how much people can get away with when people think that the actor is hot. I've got another whole video, by the way, which is just going to be a separate thing coming out in the next few weeks, because I'm gonna make a whole other video just about Delina and Stelina and who I think should have been with who, like, and Elena and Stefan. That's just gonna be its own video and like what happened with her and Damon basically. But I'm gonna have maybe another whole video, to be honest, like a character deep dive in Damon himself, because I've got literally like 10 pages of notes on his evolution and how he was just gradually butchered, and I feel like it's really important to talk about because they were just literally playing ping pong with his character. It's really annoying. But now we get into season 6, which is actually really good. It's better than season 5, I would say, although it has its flaws. But we have this whole subplot with the Gemini Coven, which is really great, by the way. Like, I love that. That should have had its own show. It was so good, like a spin-off or something. And we have Damon and Bonnie being stuck in the afterlife together and trying to find a way out and forming a friendship, which was so cool for both their characters. It gave Damon something to do separate from Elena, and it gave Bonnie something to do separate from Elena. Then we're introduced to Kai, who is another major villain that I have extremely mixed feelings about because, okay, on paper, he's not the best villain. He was kind of the stereotype of the mustache twirling, serial killer, sociopath who doesn't really like have a real motive. And he's not original, like at all. There's nothing unique about Kai. I can acknowledge it. But kind of in a way, that's why I love him, because he's not like this supernatural scary. He's the real life boy next door scary. He's just that psychopath where his evilness feels so real and so sadistic because it could actually be real. That's what makes it scary. And also the actor plays him in a way where he's just so funny and so like charming that it's hard to not like him because the actor just nails it. Like, he smashes it out of the park. And I loved the introduction to him being a serial killer who massacred his entire family, and the way that was revealed and the flashback to when the massacre happened in episode 8. Like, it just was so fresh. The show hadn't done anything like it before, and I actually really liked that. But then, you know, there was some bad kind of seeping into the season. For example, Alaric's pointless relationship with Joe that was really bland. But I was happy for him though to find love, because Alaric's lost a lot of romantic partners and people he cares about. And then on their wedding day, which is by the way so cringe, Joe dies. I'm sorry. That's just cruel. If you needed to remove her and Alaric because they serve no purpose anymore, great. Have them run away. Have them leave town. Have them go missing on the run to start a new life. Don't just brutally massacre her on her own wedding day. And then the fact, this is what annoys me more, that Joe literally died on her wedding day, killed by her own brother Kai, and then everyone made it somehow, it's quite miraculous really, all about Elena, because Elena had some injuries at the wedding and was taken to the hospital. And they somehow managed to pivot it back to Elena and make it an Elena thing. Like, maybe if someone had stepped in and saved Joe with some vampire blood while she was bleeding out, she could have been fine. But because everyone was freaking out over Elena being hurt in the rubble somewhere, they were too distracted to even think of it. And you might think, okay, like, so what? It happens. No. The issues go on. I'll just give you a list, okay? I'll just give you a list of everything wrong with season 6. Number 1, the travelers and the ridiculous idea of a no magic zone, which I still don't really understand the concept of. Number 2, how Jeremy's bad school attendance was boiled down to him faking his own death. And the teachers agree that that's what he did because that's what they're told, so then he gets into trouble. Alaric going from a vampire to human, the whole supernatural stuff, just everything with Alaric's character and his relationship with Joe. Caroline turning off her humanity. The fact that the whole finale became about Elena and her sleeping curse and her injuries when Joe had just died. And I think she was pregnant. Oh my God, was she pregnant when she died? Oh my God. I hope not. Was she pregnant? I can't. Just the whole thing. Everything involving Liv, I just can't stand her. She's so rude. Stefan having no role in season 6 and not even really meeting Kai, who's the main villain. Death truly becoming a meaningless concept in the show. Elena removing her memories of Damon for no reason. Them not killing Kai multiple times when they had the chance, even though they knew how dangerous he was. Damon and Stefan's mother being annoying and pointless. Elena and Damon deciding to take the cure to vampirism and taking it at the worst possible time when they knew their lives were in danger. Matt picking a fight with Tyler and wanting to be a deputy. Them burning Caroline's dead mother's letter for real instead of just pretending to burn it. Enzo being infuriatingly annoying in season 6, like stalking Sarah Salvatore, having this weird one-sided revenge vendetta against Stefan, and trying to like use Matt like when he should have left. Also, Matt's irrational hatred of vampires, even though up to this point they've all been his friends. The whole Sarah Salvatore storyline. The unnecessarily heartbreaking separation of Elena and Damon when she goes under the sleeping curse. I don't like the way Stefan just ghosts everyone. Like, I get it, he's having a hard time, but he literally ghosts everyone when he thinks his brother Damon has died, and that's not okay. There's a difference between just letting people know you need to go away for a while and just leaving and starting a new life in a new location, new girlfriend, new job, and not telling anyone that you're like okay. Like, I don't know, it just doesn't sit right with me. And what I disliked even more was Caroline's reaction to him needing some space. And there's more. Liam, just as a whole. The fact that they can open the door to the afterlife, I have mixed feelings about, because sure, it's cool, but it also really lowers the stakes knowing that it's that easy to just bring people back, because it kind of reduces the finality of death, which is normally very final. And just Elena's boyfriend Liam, he just annoyed me. The fact that she was even considering telling him about being a vampire was insane because she'd just met him. As you can see, that is a long list. I was not really having like problems or qualms with the show like that serious earlier in the show, but there were some really good things about season 6. I loved the corn maze event. That was a slay. I liked how Stefan attacked his douche of a boss at the mechanics and just really has this attitude now more than ever of I just don't care. Like, I don't care. It's so funny to watch. I loved Caroline's mom. Like, she was slaying. I love the Damon Bonnie friendship because it was adorable and not everything needs to be romantic all the time. And despite everything, despite all my criticisms, Elena and Damon have some genuinely extremely romantic moments in season 5 and 6. But now we get into the real stuff, okay? Seasons 7 to 8. I hate it. I cannot stand it. I am so bored out of my freaking brain, it's not even funny. I'm on my phone while I'm watching the show. I'm gonna show you this. Yeah. Not joking, I'm zoning out. I can't concentrate. I don't remember a single thing that happens. There's no stakes. They're introducing this like flash forward to the future thing. Like, but it's so clumsily put in that it just makes no sense. The show died the minute Elena left. There is no show without Elena. You can't just have the main character leave. It's stupid. Nina Dobrev like didn't renew her contract. She left the show and that's why they put her in the coma and the other characters stayed on, but it doesn't work without her. The show is just exhausted, but rather than just ending, it keeps going. It's like dragging itself to the finish line. Then we have the heretics who again just feel like a repeat of the tomb vampires from season 1. They're just really cringe. In fact, many of the characters, like Damon and Stefan's mother is a perfect example with her whole clan, are really cringy. And the show was never cringy before, but it like becomes cringy. And it's the same thing in season 8, but worse. I want to just like die. I want to die watching it. It's terrible. The explanations they're giving for the world building and supernatural lore are starting to make like less and less sense. It's like they're not even trying. They have this whole magic bell siren thing with no rationale to it. This whole soulmate explanation thing. I just wish they would stop. And a lot of the problems are not the ideas. The ideas are fine. Facing off with the devil is not an inherently bad idea, but it's the execution. And then it's really distracting because in the finale, we have the devil, right? The devil doing things. And then it turns out that Catherine's been behind it all the whole time in the finale, and she wants to blow up Mystic Falls, but she just kind of appears. There's no real sense of motive or plan or reason as to why she's chosen to like come back and really wreak havoc on everyone once and for all. And the finale wasn't bad at all, but it could have been better considering this show's standards. And the worst part of season 8 by far is the way that they have Nina Dobrev return for the finale. And so they need to find an excuse for why she wakes up, and they deliver us the most lame-ass excuse ever, where Bonnie literally just wakes Elena up from her sleeping curse. She just wakes her up. No explanation. She just wakes her up. She's like, I did a spell. Like, thank God I know how to be a witch after all, I guess. I figured it out. We don't even see the scene leading up to it, the build up, when she figures out the code on how to crack it to wake Elena up. Elena just wakes up. Like, are you joking? Are you actually joking? And the worst part is that we just move on. Like, we're just like, yeah, cool. And Kai had very clearly said before casting it or after casting it that if Bonnie tried to kind of interfere or help or save Elena in any way, she would just die on the spot. Now, it would have made more sense if what was going on is that Elena's life was actually tied to Stefan's, because Stefan dies and Elena basically wakes up immediately. So it would have made more sense if maybe Kai had lied about who Elena's life was tied to and it was actually tied to Stefan's, and then she wakes up when Stefan dies or something. But the writers didn't even think of that. It's like something fans came up with, but not even something that the writers came up with, which is insane. And the finale is like so anticlimactic because of this really awkward, unexplained tension between Ian Somerhalder and Nina Dobrev. Now, the actors dated on the show around season 3, I believe, which is part of the reason as to why their chemistry was on fire, because the actors were attracted to each other in real life in a way that fans could not deny that they had way more chemistry than her and Stefan ever did, right? But at some point the actors broke up and people were actually harassing Ian's partner, now wife, over it because fans are crazy and believe that, you know, the actors are the same as the characters. But it really comes across in their acting, or it's obvious that Ian's trying to not seem too interested in Nina. Now, Nina's acting's not great, but you can see she's trying, whereas it's like Ian's not even pretending to try. So in the finale, when we should be excited for this couple to get together and be reunited finally, they're just doing these really awkward kind of grimaces at each other. And I was trying, you have no idea how hard I was trying to concentrate when I was watching seasons 7 and 8 to review for you guys. I was like, just concentrate, come on, like, focus. I couldn't focus because it was so boring. Have I mentioned how boring it was? So boring. So on a more positive note, let's get into these amazing characters, which, let's be real, is the reason most of us were watching this show anyway, because they're amazing. Let's begin, shall we? Vicky. I don't like Vicky. She's annoying. I'm glad they killed her off, but I will say she became way more interesting after she became a vampire, but her whole pity me, my life is so hard thing, and like thinking everyone was against her, got really annoying after a while, and she caused more problems than anything else. Although I did love that dance her and Damon did when they were kind of drunk and naked, which became very TikTokified. I thought that was iconic. Jenna next. Nothing to say about Jenna really. She's like, what was the point? Who was she? She was boring and bland, and they definitely should have killed her off when they did. However, she was a far better parent than she realized, and therefore it was really heartbreaking when she died. Tyler. Tyler deserves his flowers. He's not as bad as people say he is, okay? He just was done dirty. He just served no purpose because they didn't give him anything to do. He has a lot of character growth in episodes 1 to 5. He was so unlikable. He actually, as they often do in the pilots, they do weird things. They do weird things they would never dream of doing in the rest of the show with the characters. For example, him trying to RIP Vicky in the pilot and being like sexually aggressive. He never really did anything like that again after those first 5 episodes, and we finally get an explanation for his untamable anger, which is that he's a werewolf, which explains why he has this uncontrollable violent rage that he doesn't understand. I think for anyone watching who has anger issues and has experienced it, you could probably really resonate with his character, where he's just blinded by his rage, and it literally runs away with him. He has beef with Matt, he has beef with Jeremy, but then this crazy thing happens where he becomes a better guy. I love the idea of a werewolf family curse. Like, it's so interesting, this idea of generational trauma and like things being passed down, like behavioral patterns, and him needing to be the one to break it. I will say that past season 3, he started to lose a lot of his purpose. And I've already made a video about Bonnie, as you know. I've got a whole playlist for this show. I'll link down in the description, but maybe it's high time I filmed a Tyler video and like justice for Tyler kind of thing and post that too, because Tyler was just done dirty. He was put through so much. Klaus, like the woman he loved, Caroline, he couldn't even be with because Klaus separated him from her. He took her away from Tyler and he was treated so badly by Klaus. It was insane. Like, he was a good guy. When Elena got kidnapped by Klaus and started to be drained of her blood, Tyler went to save her. He was so sweet. He really loved Caroline and he was forced to leave her at like multiple points. And he was forced to turn on Caroline at one point, and Klaus killed Tyler's own mother. And then the worst part is that people make out that Tyler is the bad guy and he's villainized for wanting to protect his friends and allowing Klaus to possess his body, and it was just messed up. Like, he really did the best he could. The next character is Caroline, who is one of the best characters in the show. And I know that some of my friends disagree, and I get what they mean. Like, my friend, I was talking to her recently, and she basically said that she really doesn't love everything about Caroline, and something about Caroline annoys her, and some of the things that Caroline said did not sit right with her, but she feels weird saying it because apparently everyone loves Caroline. And I agree, like, as much as I love Caroline, sometimes the things that she did and the way that she behaved was like extremely off-putting, and that's maybe not talked about enough. But aside from that, she is like a good person and she is a really good character. At first, when we meet her and she hugs Elena in the hallway in season 1, she asks at some point if she's shallow, like kiddie pool shallow, which she is, but her character becomes less shallow as the show goes on, and she develops into a very strong, badass vampire. And it's so fun to watch. She's so feminine and cute, and I just really like her. What Damon did to her in season 1 was far worse than I had realized. It was abusive and terrible, and he should have been really held accountable way more for what he did. You can tell that the show came out in a period where hyper girly girls and ultra femininity was demonized, because no one really takes it seriously what's happened to Caroline, because everyone's just rolling their eyes a bit and they don't like her. But she's one of those characters where as the show went on, she just got better and better and better and better and stronger and stronger. And she has chemistry with every single guy, not even joking. Stefan, Matt, Tyler, Damon. Like, it's hard to know who to ship her with. She suffered the same way everyone else did as the show dragged on. Like, her whole forced impregnation, half dating Alaric thing in season 7 and 8 was just tragic. And her romantic subplot with Stefan really made her character incredibly boring at the end, because they just don't really work together. They're just very dull. But aside from that, I love Caroline and I don't really have anything bad to say about her. Next is Jeremy. Jeremy. Oh, Jeremy, I wanted to like you, but you're just so boring, man. The actor who plays him, it's the actor. The actor's the problem, not the character. Okay, he may be like the most handsome man in the cast, but he's so boring. His acting is so wooden. Every single scene, he delivers the line the same way. How is it possible to be in a show for hundreds of episodes and say the lines the same way every time? In the entire scope of the show, he doesn't really manage to get across like a single emotion. But I did feel really bad because Jeremy is clearly grieving and struggling with his mental health and looking for an escape, but everyone just keeps calling him a bad kid. And also it annoys me how many times people say, we need to protect Jeremy, we need to get him out of town. And he gets out of town for like 2 episodes and then comes right back again, and no one's actually protecting him. Like, they're saying how much he needs protecting, but yet no one ever leaves Mystic Falls. And the explanations as to why they can't leave are so weak. And inherently, Elena wasn't protecting him, because if she really cared about protecting him, she would stay out of it and she wouldn't date Damon or Stefan, because the more involved she is with them, the higher the chances are that she's used as a bait for something or just gets wrapped up in something she shouldn't be wrapped up in. But Jeremy is just an inherently annoying character. He's often used as a plot device to cause problems, which is very irritating after a while. And they tried to give him something to do with his Hunter storyline, but prior to that, literally no one cares about Jeremy, and also he doesn't have anything to do. The next one is Rebecca, which I know this is an unpopular opinion because I've seen the posts. I can't stand her. I think the actress does a terrible job in this role. she just doesn't sell it for me. I feel like she's one of the worst actresses in the show. Like, she does not work with this character. I mean, I've seen her in other stuff and it was better, but she doesn't work with this character. I'm sorry. Like, I can hear her Australian accent. She doesn't sound American or British or anything at all. She just sounds Australian to me. I would know I'm Australian. It's just not good. And also, I know everyone likes her, but to me, she's so whingy and obnoxious and annoying. Like, the only thing I like about her is that she always called out Elena because no one else seemed to. Actually, speaking of Elena, let's talk about Elena. I made a whole video defending Elena Gilbert because I think people are too harsh. And she does a lot of good stuff that people don't talk about. And she also was very traumatized and doing the best she could, and nobody seems to want to acknowledge that either. However, rewatching some stuff for this video, I have to admit, I do get why people don't like her. Because a lot of things she does is really annoying, especially if you're binge watching this show. She is, first of all, a really overly romanticized character with everyone talking about how nice she is, but you never see her being nice. And talking about how her only flaw is that she feels grief deeper than anyone else, which doesn't make sense because that's not a character flaw. And I'll stand by the fact that she's not as bad as people say she is. However, she's such a terrible main character because she doesn't change at all. She's stagnant from beginning till end. She's the main character and yet the least developed. It annoys me when people say the argument, everything's about her, because in my opinion, she's the main character. Hello. So of course everything's going to be about her. But more of my problem is the fact that she is a massive victim damsel in distress who is used as a plot device with no autonomy to just cause problems. So people need to swoop in and save her. She causes a problem. People need to save her. She's told stay out of it, and she intentionally puts herself in harm's way because she thinks she knows better, makes herself a liability, and then Damon and Stefan are in danger and have to come in and save her, when if she just stayed out of it and just knew when to just stay out of something, things would be so much easier. And she constantly overestimates her own strength and power because she's so brave, but in a way that's like really annoying, where certain situations could have been avoided, but every single time it's Elena being used as bait, Elena being kidnapped like 3 times, Elena being in danger, Elena being hurt, and everyone needing to come in to save her and be her bodyguard. And the problem is that we're meant to like her. There's no self-awareness in her obnoxiousness. And in season 6, episode 17, she's again just being selfish. Like, she's trying to convince Damon that he should be happy that his mum's alive rather than listening to his perspective, which is that he's not interested in his mum, and also he's scared because he doesn't like the fact that she used to be a ripper and he doesn't want a relationship with her. And in season 6, the minute she becomes a vampire, season 4 onwards, the selfishness and erratic behavior just gets worse. Like, I don't like in season 6 the way that Sheriff Forbes is sick and dying and in hospital, and somehow the writers find a way to make it all about Elena and using it as an artistic moment for her to run and kiss Damon in the hallway of the hospital, when the scene should have been about Caroline potentially losing her mother. And that was a weird thing to happen considering the context, because the writers at this point were so obsessed with Delena, and when her relationship with Damon really kicks into full swing, it's like she loses even more of her agency and independence separate from her relationship with Damon. But ultimately, she is the main character, and I think that the show really wasn't the same without her when she left, and I really love Nina Dobrev, so it's hard for me to criticize. So, Catherine. She's the best character in the show. I'm calling it. She's the best character. It's just that I don't like the way they executed some things with her and the kind of route they took her character, but just in terms of charisma and everything, she's amazing. The way they built up her arrival, 10 out of 10. Her one-liners, 10 out of 10, slam dunk, mic drop, perfect. The issue is that they built her up so well in season 1, but then when she actually comes into the show in season 2, a lot of her plans don't really seem that impressive, and they don't really utilize the doppelganger thing to full effect. Like, I thought that she would maybe take over Elena's body and like not take her over, but like pretend to be her. And I thought it would be this thing of like us not knowing who's on screen, but they always made it so obvious when it was on Elena on screen and when it was Catherine that there was no real tricking the audience mind game thing going on, which there should have been. And again, like I said, a lot of her plans fall through, and she's meant to be this mastermind, but the stuff she does doesn't really work, so it kind of reduces her impact. The one really good trick she had was that she'd kind of taken over Jenna's mind to use her hypnosis thing on Jenna, so Jenna would like spy on them and no one knew, and that's how she had so much insider information, because she had like a spy, which is Jenna. And I wish they'd done more stuff like that, but it was genuinely shocking. But I don't like the direction they took with her character by the end of the show. I feel like they had not just one but multiple missed opportunities with her, or they had her leave when she just shouldn't have left and she should have stayed, or where they kind of made her good and then kind of bad again because they didn't really know what they were doing with her. But I'll stand by the fact that Nina Dobrev just freaking nails it in this role, and she's such an icon. Enzo, nothing to say. I just don't like him. Stefan. So a main criticism I hear of Stefan is that he's boring, which is true. And I think it makes a big statement, certainly, that a vampire who's lived for hundreds of years with hundreds of years of life experience and lived through wars and climate change could be boring. It's quite impressive, really, that they managed to make him boring and bland, because ultimately he is boring and bland. But I think he's better than people give him credit for, truly. For example, he was never just the good brother. We learn by the end of the show that he and Damon are very much on equal footing regarding who's good and who's bad, because Stefan has a hidden darkness to him. He just tries to take the moral high ground and criticize Damon, but that's only because he's scared of what he is deep down, which is an addict to blood. And there's a lot of allegories and allusions to addiction through Stefan's struggle in season 2 with trying not to drink, but he can't help himself, and hiding his drinking blood and lying about it to the people he cares the most about, and then getting defensive and angry in his attempt to get more blood. And people say, oh, he's a wuss. He's not a wuss, okay? There's many times where he's aggressively killed someone without hesitating when he maybe could have saved them. The problem is not Stefan. He works well when he's a villain. His subplot with Klaus being a villain in season 3 was amazing. The problem is not him or the actor. The problem is that Paul Wesley plays evil better, but they kept trying to make him good, and they also kept trying to make him this hopeless romantic lover boy and force this obsession with Elena even when the chemistry wasn't there. And there was too much emphasis in his romantic storylines when he's so much more than just a lover boy. These storylines don't serve him, and they keep giving him storylines that don't reflect his full potential as a character. He's also one of the kindest, sweetest guys in the show, who just is eaten up with guilt about his bad behavior in the past, and yet the show just keeps treating him so badly. Like that time he disappeared and Damon and Elena didn't realize he was gone, and he was just drowning repeatedly underwater and dying and drowning again for months. It's just heartbreaking. The trauma he endured was so overlooked, and I felt so bad for him because he's just the sweetest. Stefan never wanted to be a vampire. He never enjoyed it and took pride in it like Damon did. He was just eaten up with guilt. And because death in the show has no meaning, it's hard to feel truly devastated when Stefan dies in the finale, because you know he's going to come back. It doesn't feel like that big a sacrifice, and that's exactly what happens because it has no impact. And literally in the following scene, not even joking, we see him in the afterlife. And everyone is so judgy towards Stefan sometimes, like the way that he handled his grief, as in people were saying he shouldn't have left town at all when he thought Damon died, or he was lying to people saying that he was helping save Damon and look for a way to save him when he wasn't. But in a way I kind of disagree at the same time, because his approach was not to hurt anyone. It wasn't to be nasty. It was just to withdraw himself from that situation and grieve privately. And Elena's reaction, by the way, was the same as Stefan's. She wanted to just drink away her sorrows and take drugs and have her memories erased of Damon and deny it so she would never have to face it head on. But no one ever really was mad at her about that, but then everyone criticized Stefan for his reaction to Damon's death. So I like Stefan. I think he's super cool. He's a great dude. He's just underutilized. Okay, so let's talk about Mr. Sexy Blue Eyes Damon Dreamboat now. He could be potentially the best character in the Vampire Diaries, up there with Catherine. Damon is a slay. He's a slay. His one-liners are amazing. This whole video could be about his one-liners. And I get why people enjoy seeing his character on screen the most, because it's hard not to have fun watching him. Ian Somerhalder has a completely suave, casual, unself-conscious, sexy charisma to him that is just like addictive to watch, and he's so comfortable in this role on screen that you just want to see more of him. And he really truly embodies Damon from like head to toe. I loved that Damon always enjoyed the power and status of being a vampire, and yet he was more than happy to give all of that up to be mortal with Elena. It just shows how much he loved her, and I do really, really ship these two. Like, I know it's toxic, I don't care, I'm obsessed. His redemption arc was amazing in seasons 1 to 2. The way he slowly got better, slowly improved, slowly cried and showed emotion. And it's so fun watching him constantly kind of jump and weigh up the scales between good and evil and just skirt the line, and he's sometimes good and sometimes bad, and he's struggling with his own evil side and the temptations of evil. His main issue was that he was overpowered, and I very rarely say this, but this was actually a case of the writers using him too much and his own kind of sassiness really not working in his favor, because he was so fabulous that it's like the writers thought, okay, everybody loves watching evil Damon, let's just make him evil as much as possible, even when it literally backtracks all the hard work he's done in his character development. They wanted to have their cake and eat it too, ultimately. They were kind of selfish. They thought, we can have evil Damon doing bad things and being charismatic and evil and funny, but we can also have him being the lovely man lusting after Elena and wanting to be good for her. And those two things are fundamentally at odds with each other. You have to pick a side. Is he good or is he bad? And everyone is prepared to just forgive Damon for everything he's done, which is pretty privilege at its finest. And the actor who plays Damon even said so himself, that the whole show is basically a social experiment of pretty privilege, and how much people will forgive and make excuses for someone they find attractive, even if it is the most unbelievably messed up stuff known to man, like being a serial killer. And again, just because Damon has a sweet side and is in love with Elena, that doesn't actually excuse all of the terrible things he did. But the writers wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted to make Damon a lovable bad boy, but also someone that will be redeemed, but also someone that can be evil when they need him to be. It doesn't work. It makes it extremely confusing. And I don't like how the show basically is encouraging us to root for someone who is a rapist. Like, it's weird. And the thing that really stands out to me that I still remember, that no one talks about, by the way, is the Andy thing. Because in season 3 he was supposed to have gotten better, and yet when he was going through something and he was having a hard time, he did the same thing to Andy, I think she was a journalist, that he did to Caroline in season 1, where he uses her, he wipes her memories, he controls her mind, and he preys on her and uses her for her body and allows her to think that she likes him. But the only difference here is they try and justify it by saying that this time it's consensual because she was genuinely kind of into him and he kind of cared about her, but that doesn't excuse the way that he was treating her. And just because he was having a really hard time, that did not give him an excuse to violate her. This show is truly an example of how to romanticize toxic and unhealthy relationships, like many teen soapy dramas of its time. Ian Somerhalder, again, like I said, he's talked about how this show is basically a psychological experiment to see how far Damon can push it and people forgive it. And I mean, he's not lying, because we forgive everything. And he himself said that he didn't like where the show took Damon's character later on. He said he was nearly in tears in the writer's room about it, because he could just see him, you know, going bad suddenly after being so good for like a whole season, and then doing bad things with Enzo. And it was just so upsetting, because he was like, what's happening with my character? And unfortunately, it is confusing and it is boring, because it's repeatedly you making him good, then he's reminded of his love for Elena, but then she upsets him so he goes bad, but then he decides to be better for her, but then he's tempted by evil stuff again, and it repeats in a very, very boring, monotonous cycle. And I really hated how they reverted all his development in season 4, and just made him go evil mode again. I know that Paul Wesley is a very active animal rights and vegan activist talking about sustainability and really amazing stuff. And same with Ian Somerhalder, who's talked a lot about sustainability, protecting the oceans, protecting the planet, charity work. And I think it boils down to a lot of people just seeing the charisma and sex appeal of the actor and maybe not really analysing Damon properly, in the same way that with Ian Somerhalder, they're not really like listening. They're more there for maybe his looks and his charm. And I actually feel bad for the actor because he's done certain award shows or talks where fans are there and they're all screaming and yelling at him, yelling over him even when he's trying to talk about some kind of charity work or thing that he's extremely passionate about. But that being said, I love Damon. I think he's one of the most unique characters ever created, and Ian was born to play this role because he's really good in this role. The next character is Bonnie. Watching Bonnie's development over the course of the show, I was beyond shocked by how disrespected she was. And this show in general does have a racism problem. I was aware of that, not just with Bonnie, but the fact that every major or minor black character is killed off for seemingly no reason. But the case is even worse with Bonnie, and also the way that Kat Graham, the actress, was treated in real life. At the beginning of the show, we learn a few things about Bonnie's magic, like she can predict the future and set fire to things with her mind, and that she's an extremely powerful witch, but that's it. And the development for her powers doesn't go any further than that. She's also chronically single, and if she is with someone, her love life kind of goes nowhere with them, which is very unusual for a show rooted in romance, but it's like they didn't want her to seem too sexy or too desirable or take on a major role in any big ball or fancy event where you get to dress up. The way her magic works doesn't make sense. Her relationships were not invested in, and her trauma is continually overlooked, whereas other characters like Elena get half a season dedicated to their grief. Every single person Bonnie cares about, romantically, familial or otherwise, is basically murdered in front of her. We barely learn anything about her family or home life or her parents compared to the other characters on the show. And she apparently dies in season 2 to try and stop Klaus, and we see her dead on the floor, but then she comes back to life again. But how could she resurrect herself if she was already dead? I don't know. They don't explain it properly. People were calling it the mummification of Bonnie, which is such a great way to put it because that's what happens to many black women in shows and in media. There's a constant pressure on her to be a martyr and save everyone at the expense of her own safety, well-being, and just life. Like, she can't say no to anyone when they come to her with a request or something they want fixed. And what's funny is people love Bonnie now, and they love Kat Graham now, but I mean, when you watch the show at the time, many people did not like her, and there were many racist posts about her on forums, and many people that did defend her were then told they shouldn't have defended her. If you want to see my video about Bonnie Bennett, that will be linked in the description, because that's just, there's so much to get into there. The fact that she wasn't allowed to wear her natural hair on the show is insane. Like, just layers upon layers of just very blatant or subtle racism. And it's very sad because Bonnie's a queen. She's so sweet, she's so amazing, and it's a shame that there was so much pressure on her and this expectation to be strong all the time, as opposed to them just allowing her to live her life and be the sweet, sweet lady that she is. So hashtag justice for Bonnie, because this will never cease to annoy me. The next character is Matt. Matt is a terrible character, just useless. I remember I got a mug one time that said, "If Matt Donovan survived Mystic Falls, you can survive today." Which is literally the perfect summary, because the fact that he managed to stay alive and be human the whole time is incomprehensible to me. And what's more incomprehensible is that he wasn't kicked off the show. Like, he must have been sleeping with the director or the director's husband or friend or something. Like, there's no way that he wasn't staying on that show unless it was for connections. At the beginning of the show, we keep being told that he's Elena's close friend and that they used to date. And we're being told that, but yet I never see them hanging out, and there's no real proof of that history of friendship. So I'm just like, were you actually friends? He and Caroline were one of my favorite couples in the show and the most easy to root for, but then they broke up when she became a vampire, and it was never the same again between them, which I'm kind of bummed about because I feel like they could have been really good together. As Klaus's sister Rebecca says, there is something beautifully human about Matt, which gives him a level of sweetness and relatability. Whilst I agree with that, he overstayed his welcome, and after season 2 he should have left the show. He does nothing. It's a joke. Like, it's actually laughable how little this character does, how little weight he carries in the show, and how most of the show he's existing. Every scene with him you can skip. He contributes nothing. He has no reason to be there. And he's annoying. And I'm shocked, honestly, that like a whole team went into crafting this character. A whole team approved him staying in the show, and like no one said anything. The fact he never leaves town, even though it's so unsafe. The whole thing's just riddled with problems. And the fact that around season 2, he tied weights to himself and drowned himself, just hoping magically that Bonnie would know about it in time to save him without thinking it through at all, was literally comical. I hated that scene. Like, that was so dumb. The next character is Alaric. I really like Alaric's character. I just don't like the actor who plays him. He's gotten into some very public spats with Paul Wesley and other people on Twitter about stuff, in which case he's always in the wrong. He's a very like vocal Republican and a very vocal Trump supporter. He was really rude, blaming the COVID outbreak on Chinese people, whatever that even means, just like as a blanket term. Like, he's just racist and gross, and also made some seriously creepy, gross comment about how he felt like there was this sexual tension between Elena and Alaric, which is so beyond gross because he was like a parental father figure to her. So he's just a total creep. And yeah, it's just even weird talking about it. I don't really know what there is to say about the actor Matt Davis, aside from the fact that I don't like him. And it's a shame because he was one of my favorite characters, but now I can't look at him in the same way because he's so gross and weird. Anyway, let's just move on from that. And let's talk about my final subject for today, which is the romances. It's hard sometimes to truly care about the romances in the show because so many of them are lame and cringy and overdone and take up screen time that just makes you feel like you're watching this cringy show for babies instead of something like that's serious television, you know, because it's so lame. But there are some couples that I really like. I didn't like Stefan and Caroline, okay? But I did really like Matt and Caroline in the beginning. And I really like Damon and Elena. I know it's maybe silly. I don't care. I think they're amazing together. I just don't like how toxic they became post season 5. I didn't like Stefan and Caroline because he really wasn't that great with her. He never saw her value. And at points he literally like lied to her and manipulated her, like around season 6, which I also thought wasn't okay. Like, he was pretending to be interested to get something from her. And he was making Caroline clean up his mess because someone, I think his ex-girlfriend, had been turned into a vampire, and he sort of got Caroline involved to like watch over her, and the vampire went all over town causing problems or hurting people, and Caroline had to clean it up, and literally all of that was Stefan's fault. And because he just abandoned her, it would have been hard for her to ever trust him again after that in season 6, so I just didn't buy their relationship. I didn't feel like they were even that close as friends either. Apparently Julie Plec actually envisioned Stefan and Elena ending up together at the end of the show, and then plans changed, but that makes no sense to me because to me it was always obvious that Damon wasn't just a temporary rebound or mistake. He was like the one, and she had no chemistry with Stefan. Plec said in an interview in 2018 for Entertainment Weekly, "Early on, if you would have asked me, where does Klaus go when this is all over, I'd say he goes to Paris with Caroline Forbes." Which, to be honest, I would have rather she was with Klaus than with Stefan. Every single one of Jeremy's love interests needs to go. Him and Anna was a travesty. In season 4 and 3, I really shipped Caroline and Tyler, and I thought they had a lot of chemistry, but then he kind of kept abandoning her and the whole thing got a bit awkward. So in conclusion, season 3 was the best season and season 7 was the worst. And the show should have known when to just not be renewed and just to find a way to end earlier, because past season 4, it was really obvious they were just making stuff up as they went along. Although the quality difference is extremely obviously like different from the beginning compared to the end, and the final 2 seasons were like objectively bad, I still love this show and it's iconic. I really blame it all on Julie Plec and Caroline because Caroline Dries and Julie they really pushed it too far with that. But I think this show has so much merit. There's so many amazingly written characters that really kept me watching. So thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe and I will see you for the next one.